Hello and welcome back to the Play It Forward podcast presented by PeacePlayers, the podcast where we lift up voices and stories of people working in their communities and networks to promote peace and equity. I am your host, Chineze Nwagbo, and I am thrilled to be here for many reasons. I definitely missed Emmett, but we'll get there. And because today's episode is going to be, I never say anything short of amazing, phenomenal, fantastic, all those words. And so let's get to it. We will be speaking to our very special guest on the journey to life after sports. Mind blower right there. Honing in on the successful, transferable core characteristics that transcend past the playing field. But before we do that, like I mentioned before, I got to reel it all the way back in. Yes. Reel it all the way back in and introduce the most amazing co-host ever in the world. That's right, in the world, Emmett Shepard. Missed you. Really missed you.
Good morning, everyone. I miss you too, Chinny. I love the stripes. Good morning. How are you?
Striping it up. Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you? I see you sipping your coffee.
I'm good. Yeah, no, I need the coffee. I'm on my 18th cup, so I'm almost awake, which is good. God, I miss this. I miss this so much, especially today. We got some pretty heavy news in America.
Yeah.
And it's always nice and refreshing to talk to pretty insanely talented, intelligent, and beautiful women. Obviously, and life, obviously. Hey everyone, my name's Emmett Shepard. I'm the co-host here with the beautiful and intelligent Chinny Nwagbo. And Chinny, before we introduce our guest, I just want to remind our listeners,
yes, please,
that you can follow all of this amazing content that you're hearing currently at the Play It Forward podcast on Instagram for highlights, behind the scenes, day in the lives, me and Chinny's hot takes, whatever you want. You can hear it all. Also, before we go, if you could just leave a review on Apple Podcasts, it really means the world to us. It helps with the algorithm so people who haven't heard us can come find out what we're talking about. And thank you so much in advance for doing so. We really appreciate all the people who do leave a review, and only 5-star ratings only. That's how we do it.
Absolutely. I mean,
Chinny, without further ado, I'm already sweating in this sweater. So tell the people who we're talking to today.
I would love to. Thank you, Emmett. So today we are excited to introduce to you a former Olympian who competed in synchronized swimming. That's right. Synchronized swimming for both France and Australia, 2 times, back and forth. Not only did she compete in the sport, she also coached it for countries like Australia, Great Britain, and the this is amazing. The United States. When she wasn't swimming or coaching, she led an industrious life working in the executive and business space of the sports world, which was just one chapter of her life where she helped reconstruct the U.S. Synchro organization. That's amazing. And I can't wait to hear how you reconstructed that space, because I'm sure that was a lot of work. Taking advantage of her experience in sports and outside of sports, she, along with a few other amazing former athletes, created Athletes Soul, which works to help athletes from any level or background with their transition from sports to professional and post-sports life. Please help me welcome Myriam Glez. Is that correct? Glez. Welcome to the show.
That's perfect.
Welcome to the show. How are you?
Introduction.
It's not hard to do when you do the things that I've said.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah.
How are you, Myriam? How are we?
Yes, that's what I want to say right there. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm quite awake. I've been up for quite a few hours now because of the jet lag, so I'm doing good. No coffee.
Tell our guests where you're coming from.
Yeah, I just returned from Europe 2 days ago, so I'm still, waking up at 4 or 5 and adjusting slowly day by day.
Yeah. I love the subtle shot she gave me also. She was like, I've been up for 48 hours. No coffee, by the way. I meant just to let you know that I'm actually a purebred. I can actually handle some tiredness.
Exactly.
So that's good. I'll internalize that.
But the coffee will come later when it hits me in the afternoon.
Okay, good.
There you go.
Myriam, I don't know if you know this. I imagine that there have been whispers, maybe stories being told through the valleys of France, maybe to the beaches of Australia. But I'm known by some, and by some I mean all, as the Icebreaker King. Now, I didn't give this title to myself. This was passed down from generations. This is
Yeah.
something that I was born
Actually from
into.
the gods, right?
Yeah, the gods
Absolutely.
themselves. I didn't choose this life. This life chose me, kind of thing. And I want to start this episode. We always start with an icebreaker to, you know, how we say break the ice.
Right.
And today, your icebreaker is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Great question.
Do we want this in the context of sport?
Whatever,
in the context of whatever you
context
want to share.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll put it in the context of sport because why not? I had a coach, which was not a swimming coach, but a dance coach that I worked with back in my youth, who always said, you know, if you have two paths, you always want to choose the harder one because that's when you're going to be learning. And as a lot of things, it didn't make a lot of sense back then, but then once you get to this point where there's a fork and you're trying to choose which direction you're going to go, it's always paid off tenfold to travel the path that is less traveled than the one that is. So ultimately, it's just all about, you know, taking risk and reaping the reward.
Right.
Right. I have this motto that I live by that probably touches on that, which Chinny can attest to, is that seeking of discomfort. The more so, a lot of life doesn't happen until you're outside of that comfort zone, and that's where you actually grow and become, you know, you learn a lot more about yourself doing uncomfortable things.
So like Emmett just said, the ice is broken. And actually, this space right here is probably my most favorite part of the show. You know, we introduce you, we get to learn a lot about you. And then, you know, we kind of turn it over to you to share about, you know, what you're passionate about, your journey, how you got here. And so, Myriam, I mentioned a lot of your accolades in the beginning, and I kind of want to, you know, expand a little bit on your story about how you got here, as I mentioned. But most importantly, how does one get into synchronized swimming and decide to pursue something this is such a super niche sport? So tell us about that. That's what I want to hear about.
And, you know, in the context of like growing up in France, it's probably slightly different to what you've experienced with the sport. It's much more non-sport in Europe, in France, and in other countries. Not like in the US. So I watched it on TV. We had back at that time, it was the European Championship. I think it was European Championship and then Seoul, the Olympics. And so I watched one of the French athlete compete and win a medal at the European Championship, and just like told my mom, this is what I want to do. So I guess that was the origin. And then, you know, my mom looked for the local club, and I went for a tryout, and that's how I got into it. So my parents are not swimmers, not athletes.
Right.
We had no link to the sport whatsoever. And I just, you know, just like a kid dreaming and seeing something on TV and go, oh, that sounds fun. Like, let's try it.
That's fascinating. That's so fascinating.
And having a supporting family around you to make sure it happens. Sorry, Emma, go ahead. Please.
No. It was just, so in France, it was it was a more popular sport than probably in the US. You said, like, was it, what comparison sport in terms of what's in America could you say for France? Like, was it like most of the demographic of people were watching this on TV as a sport, or was it just like you found this sport on TV and like a couple of your friends knew it, but not everybody, or was it much more of like a baseline popular sport?
So I'd say, first of all, like, if you say I'm a synchronized swimmer, everybody understand what that means and know what it is. So generally the population is aware of the sport. I think there are 17,000 synchronized swimmer licensed with the National Federation in France, which is four times more than in the US, I think. There's a lot of clubs. There was multiple clubs in the area where I grew up. And I came from a club that had like 500 athletes. So it's sizable in terms of sport. It's not, you know, it's not like gymnastics or track. It's not that level, but, you know, it's similar to like diving and sort of like a second tier kind of Olympic sport. But for female, it's pretty popular.
Right.
So I sorry, Chinny, I have just one more follow-up.
No, never be
sorry. What about it when you saw it as a as a kid, what made you so fascinated with it? What was the part that was like, this is what I want to do, kind of thing?
Absolutely.
You know what? It's hard to tell now, like looking back and trying to understand. I loved the water as a kid, and I would spend like all my summer, playing in the pool at my auntie's house, and so I was really definitely comfortable in the pool. I think that's what attracted me the most to it first. I liked the pool, but I didn't want to be a swimmer. I didn't want to go back and forth, just like watching the black lane at the bottom of the pool. That was not as appealing, but this sounded like, okay, I can be in the pool and do something else. I don't think I was, attracted to like the sequence and the makeup. Like I think some of the young girls are really kind of drawn to that side, and that wasn't really what it was about for me. I think it was just like being able to do like movement in the water that was kind of different to swimming.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like I love your questions, because it's like setting up this next question that I'm just like thinking off the top of my head.
Go.
And that is like, it is the month, I don't know when this is going to air, but it is the month of Title IX. And so you swam in France, you've been in Australia, you've coached in the United States, and you coming to the United States, I'm sure you've had to see the impact of Title IX and the opportunities it has afforded women here in the United States as it regards sports and equal opportunity to play and equitability, that equitable lens. And so I guess my question is, having played in all these places, I'm a basketball player, having synchronized swim in all these places and seeing competition through different lenses, first, has Title IX ever impacted you in any way? And then coupling my question to what Emmett's been asking, how has synchronized swimming impacted your life? We got the Title IX question, and then how has being this athlete impacted your life?
So I think the Title IX, I think, is a really interesting question coming from overseas, because it's never something I heard about being discussed in other countries.
Really?
And you also have to put in the fact that, I did a female-only sport. It's now, there are more mixed events now in the sport, but back when I was doing it, it was mostly women. And so this is not a discussion that we were having, because it would have been the other way around. Like, how do we give access to our sport to other people, like the dancers and the figure skater? Why there are no men in the sports of synchronized swimming? So it's not really something that I came across a lot. But having said that, I also really like the idea of being aware of the inequalities and the difficult access for women in sport. And these were not topics that we touched on growing up in France or even in Australia. I didn't hear a lot about it. So I think it's really important that we can welcome that type of discussion, and that it continues to be a discussion, to be able to have more opportunity for women. I somewhat was exposed to it in the sense that growing up in my team, we had one of the athletes was Muslim in our group, and it was pretty in the 90s having a teenager doing synchronized swimming while being Muslim was a pretty big deal. Her brothers would come and watch the practice and make sure that everything was okay. And, she would like, we would have to adjust like some of the training to facilitate like when she was going through Ramadan and things like that. And for me, that was like fantastic that she was able to participate in our team, just like all of us, and that we were able to adjust to be able to accommodate and have her on our team. She was a strong personality in the group, and she contributed a lot to our team. And so we wanted her to be there. But then I think it made us realize that there were very few like her that were actually participating in our sport. And so for me, that was really nice to see that early on. And I don't think I've ever been exposed to any other Muslim athlete in my sport after that.
Wow.
So there, yeah,
Very cool.
it was fairly limited. So that's
Yeah.
kind of like my answer to the Title IX.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's impacted your life then. It's impacted your life in the sense that you've been able to have exposure to athletes you otherwise wouldn't have had access to.
And I mean, this is the beauty of sport in the fact that you get exposed to all these different backgrounds and different people that you wouldn't otherwise never get exposed to. And I lived that in every country that I swim in. You meet individuals from all walks of life that are definitely not from your cultural or social economical background. And for me, that's like the best, the biggest learning and the best advantages of doing sport is really to just that exposure that you wouldn't otherwise get.
100%.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
100%. And I think later on, I want to touch more on the access piece where you brought up in terms of also, just I think there's a clear distinction, which I sort of knew, but am getting reconfirmed from you, is that there's a clear distinction about how America views this sport versus how the rest of the world views this sport. And sort of, we'll explore that in the later half. But before we do that, I want to go back to just your sense that you've done it both in France and in Australia. You're sort of dual citizenship kind of, and representing two different countries, I think is really cool. And it puts you in a very versatile place, because it's sort of like you're sort of echoing to the rest of the world that we are citizens of the world in one way. Even though we represent one country, we're all sort of part of the same, for lack of a better word, team. But there's also this idea that I think there's often controversy when we see athletes represent one country and then move on to another country and represent that country kind of thing. And for you personally, having that perspective of being able to do both, have you had internal conflicts with yourself about identity, or has it been more so external? Have you been able to sort of drown out that noise of criticism from people? Have you gotten any criticism about it, kind of thing? And how is it received by your family on a more personal note, kind of thing?
Oh, that's good. That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic that I don't get asked a lot about, and I find that it's absolutely fascinating, and it's really impacted how I see things since I've been able to do that. So I was born in France. I grew up French as a French citizen. I took Australian nationality later on to compete for Australia. I had resumed my career when I moved to Australia, and then they offered for me to become a citizen, which at the time, the opportunity was just absolutely amazing and not really something that you kind of go, no, sorry, I don't want to do that.
No, thanks.
And so I think there's two sides. I didn't really pay attention to what people thought about it and how they would react to it. For me, this was a huge opportunity personally, but also to learn from that team, from that country, and be able to experience your sport competing for another country is just absolutely amazing. Why not try that? I think it was perhaps more difficult me taking the spot of someone on the Australian team. And I had some really gracious and lovely teammates. I never really heard, or anything never got back to me, from any of them on the team, of you're taking the spot of someone else. You're not a real Australian. I never had them, and I'm sure there were those sentiments there. It absolutely has to be this way. I took the spot of one athlete who then ended up going to the Olympics, the next one, and then another one, and then became a coach with who I have a great relationship with now. But I took her spot.
Mhm.
So I'm sure there was some difficult sentiment, but it never really got to me. So I think it's really interesting. I really took it with the mindset of discovery, and I embraced a lot of what Australia was. This country is absolutely amazing and welcoming, and the people are incredible. My experience with the team was fantastic.
Awesome.
My company at the time was extremely supportive, and things that I didn't necessarily had leaving the French team, where the environment was slightly more negative, not as supportive, and then I came into this environment that was like just really exciting and positive,
Right.
and taking everything as an opportunity, and that was really nice.
Very
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
The Aussies know how to have a good time. I've heard.
Yes, I it's interesting because having played in like different countries, there are different there are nuances that you pick up from cultures in those countries, and some things are completely acceptable, where in the US you're like, what is going on? But anyway, I want to move to how we spoke a bit about it in your intro. You're restructuring the US Synchronized organization, and so we're here, you've been this phenomenal Olympian, and then your transition into business and administrative, that business administration side of sports, to a sport that has a low profile, at least in the United States. And I'm curious to hear how you were able to make swimming, synchronized swimming, more accessible from a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. Like, how are you getting people to buy into this, and what does restructuring US synchronized swimming, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Right.
Great question.
And just to give you a little bit of background, before I got to come back in the sports world, so I worked in the hotel industry for 10 years on the marketing and sponsorship side. And eventually when we moved to England and in the US, I wanted to kind of bring those business skills back into the sports world. And that's how I ultimately came back to sport, which was not my idea at the beginning. So I joined USA Synchro kind of with no idea what I was getting myself into, to be honest. It usually is. Faced a lot of challenges as I got into it, and realized that there was little structure in place to support the elite level, but also the development of athletes on that path to the elite level. So restructuring really meant creating a pathway and some structure so that the athletes could get to be able to train at the right amount, at the right level, with the right coaches. So it was spending a lot of time creating the training center, selection guidelines, kind of level to develop for each athlete at different levels to be able to get to the highest level. So it was implementing a lot of that. It was also expanding the reach of the sport. And I want to say that the sport is not diverse. Let's be very honest and clear. Where synchronized swimming is not a diverse sport. You can watch, the World Championship right now that's happening, and it's very like a lot of the artistic sport, there is one standard that is portrayed that's white and skinny and long and model-like. And it's really hard to break that model. And it works for a lot of countries because that's how culturally they are, and that's their population. But obviously, when you're in America and you're melting pot, this is not what you get. So for me at first, the idea was, let's reach the whole country and try to get athletes from the entire country. At the time, there were 2 clubs that were feeding the national team, that were all based in the Bay Area, and 95% of the athletes came from those teams, and the coaches as well. And so the first step was, let's reach everybody and try to change that and make sure that athletes can. And it wasn't about like diverse athlete. It was the first step is like get the whole country on board.
Get the word
to try
out. Yeah.
to feed into that program.
Right.
So I think by 4 or 5 years, we had, at the beginning we had 2 clubs represented, and then we had 10. So we had introduced a lot of different athletes into the group, and same thing for the coaches. And then we started having more Latinas and Asian girls. There's still very few representation for like a Black athlete, sadly. And so there's still a lot of work to be done, but it's slowly changing. What I was working on was really expanding from a location and background perspective, which athletes we would get into the group. And now the federation has done a really good job at like bringing more men, bringing more diversity. So it's like tiny step at a time. But the problem is, you want the representation at the international level as well. And until we have that representation at the World Championship in the highest level, it's hard to inspire, younger athlete to go against all odds to try to go and swim in the pool in a sport that doesn't look like them,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think what's most important is what you said, right? Your job was to lay down the foundation to ensure that there was a pipeline, right? That the younger youth served as a conduit to the professional level. And so making sure that there was a pathway for you, that's the first place. But then we were talking about this on one of our earlier shows about not just providing the resources, but not just providing the opportunity, but providing the resources as it regards to support, right? Yeah. Like if you want to have youth of color or like young Black boys or young Black girls get into synchronized swimming, like you said, you need to have that representation. But even if the representation isn't there on the international level, when you are providing the opportunity to these Black and brown youth, you also have to have the support around them, right? And that representation can look like them. And so you can get them, you can galvanize this group of people who otherwise wouldn't be a part of a sport if even on the grassroots level, there are coaches that look like them. There are people that look like them that are encouraging them to come and be a part of this sport. And so, hats off to you that you are thinking in that
and in a sport like synchronized swimming, it's super difficult because you're trying to have clones. Like if you think about it,
Oh, I didn't think that's fascinating.
Make sure that every individual looks exactly the same.
Right.
And if you look at the teams, like they're the same height, they're the same weight, they're the same build, they're the same skin color, the hair looks the same, the makeups look the same.
Wow.
So
I never thought about that until now.
Yeah, same.
It's rethinking the whole sport. Like,
wow,
how do I value?
That's hard.
8 unique individuals, but still make them look like a collective that somehow will perform the same way. And this is important because we're talking about like height level above the water, which is influenced by, how tall or short you are, by, the way your body is set, your buoyancy, your bone structure. And so if you have cookie cutter people, you're more likely to have them all at the same level above the water to be able to synchronize their legs better, their movement better.
Right.
Once you start like changing that, you change how you're coaching, you change how you're training them, you have to change how people are going to judge, because it's no longer as easy to judge. If you see the same people, it's easy to figure out if they're synchronized or not synchronized. But if everybody looks different, how do you judge it? So like the whole structure of the sport has to completely change focus to be able to receive that too.
Accommodate everyone. But it's not bad. It's just like your icebreaker, right? You got to take the road less traveled. So let's start the
baby. It's not bad.
It's just going to take.
It's just being aware that
it's going to take time.
It's going to take time, and also some athletes will be the one that will have to fight those battles and probably not reap the rewards for it, as we know.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
There are definitely for immense change like that. There has to be some trailblazers who sort of get credit way long after their careers. That's so fascinating. I didn't even think about it. It makes complete sense to me.
Neither, Evan.
It's that the same thing. I think if you look at rhythmic gymnastic in figure skating, synchronized figure skating, there's going to be the same discussions.
So it's crazy also to me that like you're getting judged on that, and if you had a black person and a white person and they were the same height, same weight, it would still be sort of to their disadvantage, at least for the time being, just on a judgment scale, just because
of the color of their skin.
Yeah, which is kind of wild if you think about it.
And also, like, we all have internal bias, and if your entire life as a judge, you only have seen a certain way of doing it, it's going to be harder for you to see the other way. And like an example for this is, so you have judges from every country. An element that's really interesting is music. Every country typically chooses music that they like or reflect their culture or the athletes would have picked. And so it's really interesting to see what people pick and how it's perceived and received. I've heard judges really complain about the choice of like hard rock music, metal. Like some athletes have picked metal, and the judges were like, "I can't stand this. It's going to be really hard to be judged well if the music you've picked doesn't resonate with the people that are judging."
Wow, I never thought that's crazy.
And so just like thinking about all of this and how it influences it's just very different to like putting a basketball in a basket or just like running through the race.
It seems more like EQ based, like, oh, this is what I like, this is what I sounds like we need to change the judges. No, just kidding.
It's true. No, I mean, like,
it's
sorry,
you're talking about a sport that also has a problem defining itself for that particular reason, is that everybody comes from a different culture and has a different feeling in how what they like and what they don't like. So there's an element that's like technical and physical, but there is an element that's about artistic and your affinity with what's presented. And that's like, how do you
measure that?
Have different tastes.
How do you measure? That's so true.
How do you measure that?
Right. Sounds like they need to come over to PeacePlayers. We have a core value that says seeing people as people. And it just says we're really big on seeing the humanity in others and accepting people as they are.
What Chinny's basically saying is that if you need a trailblazing synchronized mixed team, it's going to be me and Chinny pretty much they're going to lead the way. I can't swim, so that's why.
Nor can I, but we can lead the way.
But the music's going to be great. The music's going to be great. We'll bring the podcast mics in the pool. It will be a whole deal.
It will be
I wanna. God, I have so many follow-ups, but I wanna take an exhale for our listeners and also for us, just to shake the arms a little bit, get the blood flowing. Chinny, why don't you tell her what's about to go down?
Oh, you are about to embark on this most amazing lightning round. Inner horns here. Welcome to the lightning round. Exactly. The host of your lightning round is the most amazing and handsome Emmett. He will send you through a series of questions. You will have 3 to 4 seconds to answer these questions. No pressure. Emmett always says we will.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll just judge you heavily with each of your answers. So feel free to take your time. No, we have a clock. We have the scorekeeper. That's Chinny. And Myriam, are you ready?
I guess.
Yeah, that's the spirit. That's the spirit we love.
That's it.
Okay, you got the clock, Chinny?
I got it. Ready to go.
All right, here we go. So, first one. Cannonball or swan dive into a pool?
It used to be swan dive, but it's definitely cannonball now.
Cannonball now? Yeah. Okay, still water or seltzer water?
Still water.
Still water. Okay. Flying or driving?
Oh, driving.
Really?
Even though I go overseas all the time,
Driving.
I am still scared of flying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I agree. I
used
agree.
to be. But I
agree.
stopped.
You're really high up in the air. Morning cafe or late night jazz lounge?
Ooh.
Definitely morning cafe.
Really? Okay.
No coffee though in the morning. No coffee for Myriam. Just
I'll have coffee, but definitely no evening. Evening is no good for me.
No.
Okay.
Dry or humid?
Ooh. Joker, I'll go not hot.
Right. But remember, humidity keeps you youthful. And
That's true. The pores
So-
love the skin pores love the humidity.
I used to say dry, but I'm moving to the humid side. So yep.
I'll
The
say
book version-
SoCal weather.
Yes, SoCal weather. Shouts out.
Please share
SoCal
with
weather.
us. What is that? What's that weather like?
It's just the best. That's
Oh.
what it is.
Mild.
Just the best.
Mild, not too hot, not too humid.
Okay.
You get a little bit of an ocean breeze too. It's like refreshing. It's
I'm
nice.
there
It's
with
good
you.
for the
I'm
skin.
there
Good
with
for
you.
the skin.
Yeah.
The book version or the movie version?
Book version.
The book version, you said?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Are you a little bit country or a little bit rock and roll?
Ooh. Rock and roll.
Okay.
Yes.
Welcome
Cannonball,
to the
Cannonball
podcast.
energy.
Right.
Okay. Who wins in a 100-meter freestyle? A burrito or a taco?
Taco.
Taco? You can give us one reason why you said that. You said that very matter-of-factly also.
Right,
So
yeah,
I
but
want to
okay.
hear why.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the one I prefer.
Go with your gut.
Okay.
Okay. Summer or winter Olympics?
Here we go.
Oh, that's a hot choice. Can't ask that.
Mm.
I mean, I say summer because they're just more sports, but I like them both.
Okay.
Mm. So are you writing this down, Jenny? You
Yeah,
writing
wait
her
not to
scores
answer that
down?
question. I
Okay.
like this. But okay. Yep. Mhm.
Art museums or history museums?
Museums.
No, you have to pick one.
No,
I'm
yep,
sorry.
yep.
I'm sorry. You have to pick one. This part of the game.
I think it's not good as a question. Okay, I'll explain why I do not like this choice. Because often history museum have hearts too. Like
That is
goes
true.
together. Like, so I'm thinking like I love the Getty Villa. It's kind of art, but it's also history. So I don't get to choose.
All right. Well, we'll fire our entire writing staff.
Yeah,
So,
they have done
we'll
a
get back
poor
in.
job. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
No, I love that. I love that. You're right. It is a bad question.
Is
I'll
it?
internalize that as well. What is the one thing you miss from all the places you've lived? That's also
That's a good question.
it's a tough question.
It is a tough question. I have to go back like 5 different different
I know.
countries to list
But-
what I've missed. Do you want to
Yeah.
hear what I've missed on each country?
Well, yeah, if you could do that within 3 to 4 seconds. Perfect. Yeah.
I missed the food from Australia.
Food from Australia.
I miss tea time from the Brits.
Tea time from the Brits.
Oh man, I'm realizing everything relates to food now.
That's perfect. That's good.
I miss sticky rice from Thailand.
Oh, sticky rice.
And I'm in the US, so well, did I say anything about France?
No, you didn't.
It's gonna be related to food as well. So yeah,
Please.
there you go. All I've remembered from every
All
place
food.
I've been is all food.
Okay, there you go. That's the answer.
Food is what connects us all, really,
I
at
like
the end
it.
of the day. Okay, which do you prefer? A horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
Hang on, a horse-sized duck. That sounds awful. What was the other one? Or
100 duck-sized horses.
The 100 horses.
Yeah, the 100
Duck-sized
duck-sized horses.
horses.
They probably have a lot of
horses.
horsepower. Then
Fun fact, that's called a gaggle. That's called a gaggle of
Yeah.
horses. Comedy or drama?
Drama.
Okay.
The last thing you taught someone else to do.
Okay, this is gonna be technical.
Mm.
The last thing I taught someone else to do was actually to belay rock climbing.
Ooh,
Oh, you didn't expect that.
Whoa.
nice.
Whoa.
Very cool.
Incredible. I've
Yeah.
always thought about doing rock climbing, but then I'm like, don't have upper body strength, so maybe I should just do that. All right, and last one. What's one thing you want our listeners to remember from today?
Oh, that is a hard one. One thing I want to remember from today. You know, we had a whole discussion on Title IX and Trailblazers, and I guess for me it would be to, you know, there's a million ways to do one thing, and there's billions of us, so let's do a billion ways of do one thing, you know.
Yeah. I like that.
Diverse thought is very powerful.
Yeah.
I think, you know, Chini, we talked before about the differences on how sports is done in the US and overseas, and mentioning that, you know, we didn't have consideration for Title IX discussions when I was in France. This is one of the things that I've really enjoyed living in the US, is understanding that every individual is an individual and is unique, and that you can build a great collective from a collection of unique people, rather than trying to like put everybody into the same box. And this is not really something that we had discussion on like when I was growing up, because I just didn't grow up in such a diverse culture,
right?
Especially living in, you know, Southern California, you just immersed in a diverse culture all the time. And so I really enjoyed that, like the fact that everybody, you know, I've learned to see that everybody is unique, and that is really rich to be like that.
Absolutely. The US will do that for you, right? I have Nigerian parents who and I won't just say them, but Nigerian culture is really big on the culture, right? We got to stick with the culture. We got to do things within the culture. We've got to, you know, like, this is how it's supposed to be. And so living in the US and understanding there are so many different people from so many different backgrounds, and collectively we make the United States of America. You're going to be forced into understanding that there is a world beyond yourself, right? There is a culture, and you know,
the French are like this too. Like, they think there's one way, it's the way, their way, their culture. And once you start traveling and living in different places, you realize, oh man, why did I do this? Like, I'm questioning everything I do and thinking, you know, there's other ways to do it now. And I think for me, that's the beauty of living in different countries and being exposed to different people, is that you suddenly realize, well, you don't know anything.
Absolutely. That's how you can become 100%. The best student.
100%.
So we want to bring it over to athletes.
Well, first off, congrats. You got through it. Oh, yes. You got through the lightning round. Well done. We'll tally up your scores and we'll send it back to you. But you got through it, and that's okay. And that's all that matters. Most people don't get through it. Most people don't get through it. They either cry or they leave in anger. So I'm for sure. I want to also just adhere to what you guys have said in terms of, I think there's a great quote from Ted Lasso. I don't know if you've seen that TV show where it says, be curious, not judgmental, in terms of, if you just put yourself, also like Chini said, you know, we're very blessed in America to be surrounded by a lot of different cultures physically. That's out of our control, but also, you know, there's a lot of places in America where you can grow up very similarly, like in France, it sounds like, where you are part of the majority. You don't see a lot of other cultures. And I was lucky enough to go to South Africa and now be in the minority, be someone who is very much placed physically into a place that I would never have dreamt of being able to be in. And it's shocking, and it's both culturally and physically, but also you very quickly realize, oh my God, this person who I thought was entirely different is actually very similar in a lot of ways. And I don't think you get that necessarily until you're physically in that place, sort of. It's one thing to just hear people talk from different backgrounds, but it's another to actually be in their backyard, kind of thing, and be like, oh, they have a backyard too, just like my backyard, kind of. It's just a little different. Absolutely. But I want to sort of jump to the thing that I found really interesting is sort of the athletes post competition,
Right.
specifically like Olympic athletes. I'm fascinated on the psychology of Olympic athletes just because they are the most driven people, I think, on the planet, besides like billionaire CEOs or anybody like that. But just there's an innate sense of like of passion mixed with obsession, mixed with just raw talent, mixed with discipline, like all of these things. And you know, you're currently running Athlete Soul now amongst other impacts, and you've gotten a taste of how you cope with that transition of being somebody who is so passionate, so obsessed, so driven to this one identity kind of thing. Like Olympic athletes in particular, that sport is their identity because it's all they think about. It's all they do for 3 years and 364 days, you know, or whatever. And so for you particularly, like, what was it like, you know, transitioning out of a sport that in America is definitely, for lack of a better word, not as popular as other sports? Maybe in other parts of the world it was popular, but that final day happens and you're sort of in this position where you're kind of like, oh, what am I doing now? Were you thinking of Athlete Soul in the middle sort of training towards the latter half of your training career, or was it something that you were kind of like grabbing to sort of find that obsessiveness back, get that like engine running again to be like, I want to do this? What was just like that post transition like for you?
So
great question.
Growing up and training and competing with the French national team, you have to pursue your academics even when you go to the highest level. One of the conditions to receiving your scholarship to be at the National Training Center is to pursue your academics. So you have to continue. So I always had that to fall back onto, but also I was doing pretty well at school, and so I never let go of my academic goal. I got accepted in a really good business school the year before the 2004 Olympics. And so I remember starting school at the beginning of the season. We got called up, for like the start of the year kind of meeting with the coaches, and I showed up and it was just me and the coach and a person from the national office. And then I realized, what's going on? And they basically said, well, we're preparing for the Olympics and we need you to make a choice. You're either going to, go to business school or you're going to prepare for the Olympics. But
wow.
The two are not going to work. And so I, was faced with that choice and ended up, choosing to go to school.
Super easy decision, probably. Super easy. Didn't stress over it probably at all.
So I did not expect to have to make that choice. I wasn't prepared to like say goodbye, and I haven't even thought about it. The good side of it is that frustration and kind of disappointment that resulted from that decision, gave me energy to like really focus on my schooling and finding a job and kind of like moving quicker into the professional world. It was kind of a bittersweet decision though. And I was lucky enough that I ended up working for a hotel company that moved me to different countries, including Australia. And then I came back into the sport and was able to swim again. And then the second time I left, I retired. It was like, okay, now I'm choosing when to retire, why I'm retiring. I already have a job. I already like have a situation. The second time around was very different. And so, some of the inspiration for Athlete Soul is my personal experience. I had an unplanned, unchosen, not very positive retirement, and then one that went really well. And I saw, how different it can be. If I had not been able to return to the sport and get closure the way I wanted it to be, my experience now would be, and my view of the sport, I think, would be very different. And so, that's part of the inspiration. But the other part is working in the sport industry. I saw other athletes go through the same difficulty and challenges. I saw how interchangeable athletes are, how, you know, that they're being discarded pretty quickly.
Yes.
They're not prepared. And that at the end of the day, we often blame like the sporting organization and say, oh, well, they're not taking care of the athletes afterwards.
The whole person.
Transition. But at the end of the day, it's not their mission. They're here their goal is for you to perform and have results. And of course, they kind of have a duty of care, but the reality is when times are rough, you're going to cut everything that's not your core business.
Right.
And so one of the principles for Athlete Soul was we want to be absolutely not affiliated with any sporting organization because we want to be in charge of our destiny. And if, the market doesn't do well or there's less funding, we don't want the program to be cut because suddenly it's no longer as important
to someone else.
And also because we want to support the best interests of the athletes while they're transitioning. And if you look at any industries outside of sport, you don't really go back to your previous employer to ask them to help you be well for the next employer.
Right.
And so, who has your best interest in mind are not necessarily the people that you are currently working with. And so one of the principles for Athletes Soul is to be fully independent, led by peers, but supporting the interests of the athletes while they go through that very intimate process of transitioning from one identity to kind of like
another
the next one.
This is it really resonates with me because I was a professional athlete for 11 years and I retired at 34, right? And everything you've said has been proven to be true. You're part of organizations, they care about the numbers that you're producing for them and how you represent them while you're playing the sport. And then afterwards you're discarded. And I think the hardest part there is finding your footing after your sports, that transitional period. So I really love Athlete Soul for that. But also too, as an athlete, I just didn't know there was any resources there. I, like you, started creating things because it is so hard to sit in front of people and say, if you don't have the education on how to articulate yourself, to say, hey, these are some transferable characteristics that I have acquired while playing on the court, and they transcend past the court and they can help this corporation in a dynamic way, right? They're like, yeah, that's great. How many years of work experience do you have?
Exactly.
Because that playing professionally that you played for like 11 years, that's good, but we don't care. So if you can show us your business administration, blah, 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 then we'll move forward. And so it was so hard, especially mentally.
I just want to emphasize exactly what you said, because I was it was screaming in my head is like, I think one thing we don't want to gloss over is that it sounds like in France, like growing up, there was a huge emphasis on academia as like, this is your baseline for everybody. It's like, you have to be, education comes first and then the sport comes after that, to some degree. Whereas in America, sport is such a lucrative business, and it is a business that we have totally thrown that educational piece to the backseat in terms of being like, 100%. Oh yeah, if you're a good sport, skip high school, skip college, just go play pro kind of thing. And yeah, it's lucrative for that person and that family, but there's so many other factors that contribute to them being successful, and not only being successful in that one moment, but being able to be successful later for the rest of their lives. That's such a slim minority that we've gotten ourselves put in this position, like Ginny said, where after an 11-year career, there's a lot of people who are looking around going, oh, wow, I don't know how to make a resume. I don't know how to talk to anybody.
And nobody's going to help me, right?
Exactly.
Or I don't know who to turn to for help.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I mean, I had no idea. Right. And then I did the Chinny thing, and that's just like I like was like getting like informational interviews, and I was like hooking onto these people, and I was finding these paths, and I was kind of a little bit insane because that's what the sport taught me. And I was creating like this list, this Excel list of people and how they got to where they wanted to get to. And I was like, you know, doing my research, and that's what I was doing in my free time, and then trying to figure out if I can get interviews with these people, informational interviews, just to talk like, how did you get here? What did you do? What doors did you open? Who did you network with? But very genuinely, but there was a sense of panic, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh. And I want to talk about the identity. Sports at that time served as an identity, but this transition helped me understand that sport was not my identity. It was a part of who I was, right? And then finding yourself helps you lean all the way into that identity, and it makes the transition a lot smoother. I say all that to say, there's a lot of emotional and mental challenges that athletes go through, especially when they're transitioning. And it's really hard to find the right people. Athlete Soul is amazing and doing great things. But I just want you to highlight some. I know you've worked with a lot of athletes, so highlight some of those. What are some of the mental, this weight bearing and things that they have to go? Like, I know you have to see this. I feel
I'm glad that you're mentioning this, because I know, like, Emmett, you talked about the education piece and how important that is, but regardless of whether you are educated or not as an athlete, you know, we found that the emotional piece and the identity and the grieving process it happens for every athlete, regardless of the circumstances of your retirement, of how much support you're receiving, of your education level,
even your playing level.
Because you know, most athletes have specialized pretty early on, dedicated so much time to their sport at a moment where everybody else sort of like playing around with their identity and figuring out who they are, like during adolescence and then during college, where, you know, most athletes haven't had a chance to do that. They like into this path and stuck into it, which is great. It helps you like be the best you can. But the flip side is, when that's gone, you kind of have very little idea of like what your interests are, what your values are,
the sense of withdrawal,
how you want to live your life. You haven't had as much time to experiment with that and to break away from maybe the framework that your family has given you as your early on values.
Exactly.
So I think this is why the identity piece when transitioning is so difficult to manage, is because at 25 or sometimes 30 or 35, you know, you end up having to deal with an identity crisis, and you know, and then you go through all the different stages of that, plus the grieving of your sport. So some of the challenges that we see, you know, outside of the loss of identity, is kind of a lack of purpose, not knowing, you know, what's the direction next. And that impacts your self-worth, your confidence, which then impacts, you know, how you search for a job. How you enter the job market. And, you know, part of it too is lack of structure, I think, is a big one that we don't really talk about.
There is no structure.
Going from a very regimented lifestyle, where you know what you're doing every day, where you're being told what to do, to suddenly having to like build that on your own. And, you know, you have this freedom that's very overwhelming for a lot of athletes. And some of them will get lost in that moment too, of like, oh, this is great, I've never had this before, let's do whatever I want, let's sleep in, let's eat what I want, let's go party. And, you know, very quickly it's hard to get out of it. So that, you know, sometimes that leads to some really difficult time, and, you know, negative spiraling down a little bit. But these are some of the main, you know, challenges.
No, I think the mental health and emotional health element of post-athlete depression is so real, and it's been clear that it's not even amongst just Olympic athletes. I think it's very concentrated amongst Olympic athletes, but it's across a lot of professional athletes in terms of that lack of identity. And one thing that is just like at least the first step in solving that is being comfortable enough to just talk openly about it and be like, hey, I'm going through this, or I know that other people are going through this. The idea of feeling like you're so isolated, I think a lot of athletes feel post their career, is like nobody else feels this way. Or if I do feel this way, I've been trained to not talk about my mental health or my emotional health during training, kind of thing. And breaking that stigma on a universal level to just be like, athletes are human. Athletes are experiencing an immense amount of anxiety, immense amount of depression, immense amount of loss of identity post their sport. And that's totally normal. And it's not just with athletes. It's more of a common thing that a lot of people feel, is that first step in order to make people feel heard and also get to a place where they can
actually started a program for current athletes to help them with emotional and personal development. You know, our core mission is to help athletes when they're transitioning, but if we can also have them better prepared for the transition, it also, you know, win-win. And so the idea of this program is it's a group coaching program where 10 athletes from different sports get together for 10 weeks. It's facilitated by a professional coach who is a former athlete. And during that program, they really learn about who they are beyond sport, outside of sport. They do a lot of
amazing.
How to define themselves without talking about their sport ever.
That's amazing.
Right.
That's
trying
so cool.
to share with others like who they are on a different level. And then we talk a lot about emotion and processing your emotion, being okay with negative emotion, emotional responsibility, and kind of like taking action, and being in charge of your behavior and how you respond to triggers. And it's a lot of work to mitigate the challenges of mental health that we've seen in athlete, and helping them kind of be better prepared and just comfortable in their own skin before they get to that step where they're gonna, you know, where everything is gonna be difficult during the transition, where it's uncertain and scary and they feel confused. If they can have at least some grounding tools about themselves before they get there, they'll be in a better position just to navigate it in general. So we have found a lot of success in that program, and the athletes that are participating really love it, and they love the fact that they are from different sport and backgrounds. I think that's the part that they like really enjoy, and they say all the time, like, "Oh my God, we are going through the same thing." Yeah, you just
Ginny, we need 4 hours. We need 4 hours. At this point.
I was like, you want to fly us to Australia? We'll take your place as well. And so I know we don't have that much time, and I kind of just want to wrap it up with this last really quick hitter. And I think it would help anyone listening, especially that athlete out there in the world who is transitioning and needs that support, because, Athlete Soul is doing exactly that. But I want to speak more towards those who can support them. What can you share? And what tips can you provide for how we can support our friends and family who may be experiencing the transition from being an athlete into this new world, this new life after sports? Maybe 1 or 2 tips on how we can support people whose job background probably, well, I can't say people because Evan and I have played and we're just amazing people, but how can we support athletes who are transitioning?
I think my first advice is not to devaluate the importance of the transition and its challenges. Especially when someone has everything on paper to have a perfect transition. I've seen this a lot where someone graduated from college, they had a successful career, they had the circumstances around the retirement are fine, like there's no end of career injury or something dramatic. They will still have to go through that grieving process, and it's still difficult. And so, not kind of completely devaluating what's going on and saying, "Oh, you're okay, you'll be okay." Like really listening and taking the time to understand that this is challenging.
Right.
So I think that would be like for family and friends.
Yeah.
And the second one, taking the time to celebrate
Right.
your sport.
Yeah.
And for someone who had a very difficult retirement that is making them look at their sport from a very negative angle, and that's typically what happened. Like if you have been deselected and that's the end of your career, like you didn't make the team, or you had a major injury and that's it, you're done. That usually makes you fairly bitter about your sport. And so trying to find, to like really go back at the beginning of your career and helping the athlete like remember what they liked about their sport, what they
fell in love,
the people they've met, what they've learned about themselves through their sport. Some of the things that, like, you can't define your whole career by one event at the end of your career.
Right.
You can't, like, it's years of learning and discovery and process. And so helping that person like shift the perspective so they can see that, and they can see that they're taking with them everything that they've learned and moving forward with that, rather than, you know, I had a shitty ending and I don't want to hear anything about it ever again.
Yeah.
Because it will come back to haunt you, and it will have to happen at some point, right? That you have to like think about it and get some closure, and you can't discard everything that you've learned for like a poor result or something that happened at the end.
Absolutely.
So trying to like, you know, celebrate everything positive that you've learned from it, and kind of rationalize that scale a little bit of like, the emotion are making me feel terrible about it, but then, you know, can I bring this down a little bit and bring the other side of the scale of everything I've learned and hold it to positive so that it's a little bit more balanced.
Absolutely.
It's easy to fixate on the bad and not appreciate the good. That's how the brain works, sadly.
Exactly.
So it is a muscle. You got to just train it.
Absolutely.
Myriam, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, about Athlete Soul, where can they find you? Drop some names, drop some links people can visit. Now's the time.
Drop some dollars as well.
Best place, you know, the best place is the website. So athletesoul.org would be the best place to go find information about what we do and the service that we offer. And you can reach me out from the website as well.
Well, you might not think you're a trailblazer, but me and Chinny and everybody who is listening to this podcast will know that you are in fact a trailblazer. So we appreciate you taking the time and talking to us small people.
Okay, good people. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening and joining us on this magnificent journey. Like I always say, if you like what you've heard, we encourage you to like and subscribe. We've got so many more amazing conversations and stories to come in the coming weeks. Share with a friend, leave a review, 5-star, you know, only. That's all.
5-star
only. Emmett, you know, I'm coming to you. Your thoughts on today?
Chinny, you did a great job.
God, I
love being your wingman. No,
stop it. No.
All right, we're just going to spend 45 minutes just complimenting each other now. I feel, and I know you feel the same way. I just feel super honored and privileged that I get to, you know, start a day in the week talking to somebody who is a trailblazer, who's a leader, who's just like making an impactful change in our world. And it's just, I feel super lucky that I just even get to be in a virtual room with people like you and people like Life and people like all the guests that we talk to. It's immensely gratifying feeling. So Myriam was no exception. She was just someone who I was just like, yeah, you're so effing talented in so many different ways, like, and your journey is still just beginning. Like, it's like just a chapter is over. She's also amazing. She's an amazing human being. So
she's very nice. She's awesome.
You can learn more about PeacePlayers and all the amazing things we're doing. Did you know this, Chinny? By visiting our website at www.peaceplayers.org and following us on social media, mostly at PeacePlayers International. That's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And you can follow behind the scenes footage, day in the life footage, and hot takes and all the bloopers probably as well between me and Chinny at Play It Forward. And that's on Instagram. And Chinny and me are releasing a SoundCloud mixtape and a Tumblr, Pinterest. No, those last two, please don't. We would never. And if we do, that's when you know something is direly wrong. Direly is not even a word. I'm losing my mind right now. I'm gonna go lie down. I'm wearing a sweater. It's 98 degrees. I'm sweating profusely on my back.